One. All right. Tanya Hall, welcome to the Happy Hustle podcast. I am so excited to connect.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I mean, you're the CEO of Greenleaf Book Group, which is the leading hybrid publisher and distributor. But before Greenleaf, you also worked in television production for Extra and E Networks, and you're an author, a podcaster. You have so much knowledge to share to all the happy hustlers out there who may want to distill their knowledge into a body of work such as a book. And I'm interested to dive in to your process and how you guys use this hybrid process to actually share people's messages to the world. But before we get into all that, let's start something that's interesting about yourself, Tanya, that maybe not too many people know.
Well, I would say what usually gets a wow out of people kind of ties into what you said about me working in television at Extra and E, because as you might imagine, I met lots of celebrities. My job was to book them for the different shows that we produced. And
Very
one of
cool.
my favorite things to share with people is an exchange I had with Phyllis Diller, who sadly has passed on, but of course, legendary comedian, set all kinds of trailblazing records for her time. But she was also an artist, and she was suicidal for a certain period of time.
Hmm.
And when I met her, we chatted. We were waiting for her driver, and we chatted forever outside of the studio waiting for her driver. And the next day, I had a delivery at the studio, and it was this beautiful John Hardy brooch and a little note from Phyllis that said, "Tanya, you're a dear." And then this
Huh.
cheap looking gold elastic bracelet covered in seahorses and starfish.
Whoa,
I was like,
that
what
is
is this? And years later, I was in the dentist office reading an article about her art. And she talked about how during her suicidal period, she was giving away her belongings to people who impacted her, which is very common in people who are suicidal. And all of a sudden, I put it all together and I was like, oh my God, she gave me that
Mm.
bracelet. That was like one of her things, just because I had an impact on her that day. And that
Wow.
was like a lesson learned for life, like you never know what's going on with somebody and the impact that a 1 hour conversation can have on them.
That's a beautiful reminder. I mean, definitely an interesting fact, but I love that that lesson was extracted from it because I recently had this conversation with somebody. He asked me my interaction with a pretty well-known health and fitness influencer. I was like, honestly, this person rubbed me wrong. Like he said something, it was a short interaction, but it was kind of, not a very great representation of them. Ever since that interaction, kind of how you had that epiphany, I now treat everyone with respect because you never know who they're going to become. And also, I always want to treat people with respect anyway, but like having kindness in your heart, empathy on top of mind, and just leading with that love. And I love that that was one of your takeaways, just really focusing on how you show up in the world is kind of how I distill that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great takeaway there. So let's dive in, Tanya. Talk to me first. I want to start things off with a bang. Like, okay, I want to write a book. What is the first step to actually starting to write a book? Like, walk us through how you get that idea from your head and start, on paper. Because I see a lot of people out there. I know the happy hustlers are interested in writing a book. What is like the most efficient and effective way to get started writing a book?
Sure. So I think the first thing to do is to get very clear on what the message is that you're trying to bring to the world. And it helps to know who you're trying to help, because that can really refine the scope of that message and make it differentiated in a way that helps it stand out from the competition. I will tell you a lesson that I learned in writing my own book, because having worked in publishing for so long, I thought, being a little maybe cocky, that I could skip the proper process. I was like, I know how to do this. Nope. So don't skip the outline. That would be my biggest piece of advice. I did
Mm.
skip the outline. And what happened was, it wasn't that I didn't have enough stuff to say. It was the opposite. I had too much knowledge, and it was too much for my readers, and they don't need to know about the book supply chain. They're trying to write the darn thing. So I took a step back and did really a micro outline where I knew exactly where I was going in each chapter and supporting points for whatever I was saying. And that made it much easier for me to sort of stay within the rails of what my reader needed. And
Mm.
also, I don't always recommend this, but it allowed me to kind of pop into different areas of the manuscript as the muse, if you will, visited. And I felt like, oh, I want to write about mastermind groups today, or I want to write about publicity. So I would definitely recommend working on an outline. It will also expose maybe any areas that are a bit too thin that you need to think about. Okay, I need to do some research or maybe interview some people and flesh out this area. So it's the heavy lifting for sure of writing a book is the outline.
Great point there. And I actually, that's how I found out about you is I read your book, which I want to tease it to the happy hustlers out there because it's a fantastic book. It's ideas, influence, and income.com. I mean, you guys can get yourself a copy of this. That book was my first introduction to Tanya, and I read it and I'm like, oh, I got to get her on the show because it was tons of gold. I mean, you've been in the publishing world for, I don't know how long, 20 plus years, you said, or
20
15?
plus years in
Yeah.
media, 17
Yeah.
in publishing.
Yeah. So wealth of knowledge. And I think that first step, and I equally skipped the outline when I started writing my draft, not because I was cocky, just because I was ignorant. But all the happy hustlers out there now know don't skip the outline because that is a crucial first step. And I think you mentioned it, but you really have to know who you're writing for, right?
Mhm.
Like what is that specific ideal target reader that you're trying to serve, and not just the demographics, I talk about this, but the psychographics, right? Like what other books are they reading, what podcasts do they listen to, what brands do they buy, where do they hang out, what's their beliefs and morals and interests. When you can really identify, and this goes for business too, especially online business, you have to know who you're serving, right? And what problem your book will solve with that, with that literature distilled into the pages of your book. What is that, what's the end result? And I think a lot of people just start writing, guilty, like stories about themselves or experiences or what they think people want. But what's your take on getting crystal clear on the problem that that book solves?
For sure. I think it's imperative to make sure that you're writing effectively and efficiently. Otherwise, like you said, you can sort of start writing in circles and then it gets frustrating because you know you're writing in circles and you feel
Yeah.
like you're stuck.
Yeah.
Um, and to your point, in terms of demographics, psychographics, we often recommend that you develop 2 to 3 personas of who your readers are,
Mm.
and not just like men under 40 or whatever, not a broad category like that. Like really get it so granular that you put a name on them, the car they drive, what they eat for breakfast.
Yep.
And if you've got those, you've got these characters, right, that you're writing for now. It also helps with another problem, which is people can get blocked by fear because they're making their writing about themselves, and they're writing in from this place of I'm going to be judged, instead of, as you were saying, writing in service of somebody and trying to do something for them. So when you have these characters, it's helpful sometimes when you start to get in that mindset to think like, oh, okay, I'm doing this for this person. And
Hmm.
then it really creates sort of a different energy around your work.
Yeah, love that. It's so true. And what I find, when I write specifically for my target avatar, I have a female version and a male version. Um, that, and I name them, like you said, when I write specifically for them, it allows me to persevere past whatever fear or negative emotions come up or blocks or the haters who might say something, or where you have that imposter syndrome where you're like, who am I to write this, like why should people listen to me? When you have that person so clearly in mind, you operate from that service over self mindset and you're writing with a purpose. Then you
Mhm.
have the actual motivation to persevere past that inevitable adversity, which will strike, right? How do
Mhm.
you, Tanya, overcome that negative feedback and that adversity that will strike as an author as you are penning your first book?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think a lot of people get stuck there. For me, I suppose because I've been in media so long, I've just accepted that there are going to be people who, for whatever reasons in their own lives, are always going to bash what you do.
Mm.
My team was joking with me when I got my first 1-star review on Amazon. They said, "Oh, you're a real author now."
So So
And
true.
so I thought I was a real author when I fired my publicist. But it happens, and you just have to accept that it's going to be probably a ratio of 95% good feedback, and then a handful of people that you just, I still read those comments. I don't take them to heart, but there might be some gem in there in a way
Yeah.
that I can grow and improve from their feedback. So I think I have an advantage there, that in the media world, that's always part of the equation, and I'm accustomed to that. And then with the authors that I work with, I think, again, it's a matter of putting them into that service mindset. And if someone didn't get something out of the book, then it wasn't for them. And that's okay. We've already established that's not who you're writing for. And you have to go through this sort of very logical process to reconcile that, which is difficult when you've got emotions under all of that, because you feel, inadequate or unworthy or judged. But that's ultimately what you have to do to get through it.
Yeah, yeah, so true. I mean, and oftentimes we allow those 1-star reviews to speak louder than the 10-star or 5-star reviews, even though they're just a fraction of the overall feedback. It's tough to sometimes release that negative feedback. And that goes not just for authors, but for, any public facing individual who's putting themselves out there. It's important to really, persevere past that negative, energy, and just, I think for me, focus on, like my self-love, my self-confidence, knowing my mission and my why always helps, persevere past that. But it is an important point to mention, because it's inevitable, it's going to happen. So, okay, so we got the outline. We know there's going to be some adversity, there's some negative feedback, but we're sitting down and it's time to write. We got clear on our message, we know who we're serving. What's the next step in putting this book together?
Well, from there, it depends on how you like to write, and everyone's different in that regard. So I'm very methodical in that way, and I need a disciplined, sort of structured approach to writing. So, especially in the more difficult sections that I kept putting off because I didn't want to write them, I made myself commit to writing a certain number of words every day. And in
Mm,
order for me to not talk myself out of that, I had to come up with some very interesting rules for myself. In my case, I have a rather uncomfortable chair. I would make myself sit in that chair, and I'm not getting up until I have 750 words, which is not really that much. But it adds up. If you do that every day, your book
mhm.
will be done before you know it. So for me, it was having that discipline structured. I know I'm going to do this approach. It kind of helped my brain to flip into the right mode, because it became a pattern. I know other authors, though, and writers who will um, write for like hours on end when the mood hits, or they have to go somewhere, like their little writing cabin they rent out, and be the writer
Done
in the
that.
woods, they're like doing the Thoreau thing. So it's different for everybody, and you kind of have to play around with what works for you. But the most important thing is to just know that it is a long process. A typical book is about 60,000 words. And so that's the part that can become daunting for people. And you have
Mhm.
to make it something that's workable for you.
Yeah, yeah, great point. I've done that where I got up every morning for like 6 months and wrote from 6 to 8, and I just had to be in front of my computer typing away for 2 hours. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to go to get the cabin in the woods. And I've done that too, So now I'm at a point where I've rewritten this book basically 3 times. And I'm excited to share it with the happy hustlers out there and with the world. But I know that good and done is better than perfect and never finished, right? Because you can just keep beating it, till it's sometimes becomes worse. What's your take on, like, good and done is better than perfect and never finished?
Well, I agree 100%. And I think the other important thing is that, as you said, there's an iterative process with any manuscript. And even something that comes into us really clean, especially if it's what we call prescriptive nonfiction, where often the types of books that I'm doing are business books or self help or parenting. And if you're an expert in that area, you actually may be too close to the content, like I was saying, I experienced when I wrote, to
Mm,
be able to step back and know what the reader, the layperson, needs from you. So the editor then is a proxy for the reader, and that editor is your friend. And people are afraid of editors, but they're there to help you create a better experience for the reader. So they're your ally, not your enemy. Um, so yeah, I think that definitely just getting that first draft done and getting some eyes on it and getting the feedback and knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to iterate and improve from there. You'll have a better product in the end and you'll be more efficient. I think it's heartbreaking when somebody has, continually pulled that manuscript out and rewritten it, rewritten it, rewritten it. And then they send it to the publisher who's like, you need to rewrite it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the second draft better. Can we get it closer to that one?
Undo, undo, undo.
Yeah, undo. Oh man, that's so true though. Like you gotta just put your best foot forward, think through who is reading it and write for them. Like when you're actually an expert like you were, you probably wrote over their head, and it was too advanced. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. Like you have to dumb it down. It has to be very clear, specific. Don't make it 20 steps when it could be 10, like these are the important factors I think that a lot of people really need to take stock in when they are putting together their outline. So great points there. So we have this manuscript. Let's just say it's complete, right? Now, what's the step that you see as I mean, this is a pivotal point when you have a finished manuscript. I feel like what's the next step and where do sometimes authors go wrong?
So I think where sometimes they go wrong is not having done some research on the front end around the different publishing options that are available to them.
Mm,
And they get frustrated because it's so much work. And now you've finished, you're ready to bring your baby to the world. And
yep.
you realize there's this other sort of a feeling of insurmountable challenge in finding a way to get it out to the world. So my book, Ideas, Influence, and Income, has a whole section on publishing options. I'd like to think it's not biased, but I wrote it and I am from one of those options. So it may be a little biased. I hope not. But it really walks you through self-publishing, traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, and how your next steps after you finish your manuscript, or even before you finish your manuscript, are going to differ depending on which of those channels you prefer. So it is important to educate yourself and know which option works best for your priorities.
Mm. Can you speak into the difference between those three options, self-publishing, traditional publishing, and then hybrid publishing, which I know Greenleaf Book Group does hybrid publishing. Talk to us about those differences and what a aspiring author would like classify to determine which one is right for them.
Sure. So we'll start with self-publishing. I think most people have a general sense of what that is. So that's if you're literally the general contractor, right? And you can take your book to Amazon, get it up on CreateSpace, and have a book, quote unquote, published pretty quickly. And they have tools there that help you templatize the cover and the interior. So they've really sort of democratized publishing, right? So anybody can list it there. Now, primarily, it will be available online. So if you have the type of content that you intend to promote online and you're not worried about what we call brick and mortar distribution, that could be a fine way to go.
Hmm.
The challenge I see some people get into when they self-publish is just quality.
Hmm.
You are not probably a book cover designer. There is an art to it. And if you're not working with an editor, people start cutting corners to save money, which I understand, but it is part of your brand. So it's important to do it right.
Yeah.
And then we'll skip over to the other side, which is traditional publishing. That is what we refer to when we're talking about like the big New York publishing houses, Simon and Schuster and Penguin Random House. So that's where you need to find an agent first and work a proposal up that pitches your book to these big houses. They pay in advance, but you make yes, they pay in advance and you make a lower royalty on the back end. So for my business authors, I use the analogy of self-publishing and hybrid publishing, where you're investing. That's like bootstrapping, right? So you're putting money in on the front end, you've got risk in the game, but you're going to
Hmm.
make more money on the back end. Traditional publishing is like venture capital. So they're shouldering the risk on the front end. They're giving you an advance, but because of that, you agree to take less money on the back end. Traditional publishing, they have strong distribution typically, and you will get a quality product. You're also giving up some rights when you go with traditional publishing. And for a lot of the people I work with, that's very important because they are consultants or speakers, or someone like you, Cary, who's like otherwise monetizing their ideas and their content, and they need the
Mhm.
flexibility to own their rights and do with their content as they wish. So that's where hybrid publishing comes in. We sit, as the name infers, in between self-publishing and traditional publishing, where the authors do invest in the production of the book, but we have access to all of the distribution that a traditional house would have access to, because not to get too deep into it, but the background of the company is we started as a book distributor. So
Hmm.
we sell into all of those accounts and have the long sales history that gets the book into the airports and so forth. So the
Oh,
authors
cool.
have the rights and they keep more money on the back end, but they still have access to the wide distribution and quality that they need to make the book a success.
I mean, that was such a elegant breakdown of the three options, Tanya, and
I've
you
done
can
it a
tell
few
you're a
times.
pro. Yeah. I mean, but it really is. It's like you think about it. Well, traditional publishing, yes, the advances is enticing because you're like, ooh, I could make some money up front and, and have um, a nice payday for all this hard work I put in. But then the long game, if you're
Mhm.
if you're short-sighted, is you might be making like less than 10% of your actual book sales. Like, what is this? What does a traditional publisher deal like standard look like?
Ah, these days, first of all, it's very difficult for, this is a COVID thing. It's very difficult for what I like to call debut, not first time, debut authors to
Debut.
even get a traditional deal, because what's happened when everyone was quarantined, people started writing. I'm
Mm,
seeing this in our business too.
yeah.
And that's great. But typically an author who's signed on to one of those big New York houses, the big New York house has what's called first right of refusal.
Mm,
So they are going to be looking at the in-house authors they already have and all their new stuff, which is making it very difficult right now for debut authors to get a deal.
mm.
But if you were so lucky for a first time or debut author with no sales history, it depends on, everything's different, of course, but maybe $5,000 to $10,000 advance, and then 7 to 10% royalties on the back end. Versus in our model, you're keeping 35% of the cover price for everything we sell, which is, significantly more than what you get with a traditional house.
And with your guys' model, walk us through how that works, like the hybrid model, because I'm sure a lot of happy hustlers out there are like, ooh, this hybrid sounds like the best of both worlds. You
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about the numbers involved and what that process looks like.
Sure. And so I just mentioned 35% of cover price, and that's where sometimes I have people go, that's ridiculous, because they think that I'm sitting on the other 65, but that's not the case. The publisher distributor sort of has this middleman role.
Mm,
We're selling to our accounts usually at a 50 to 55% discount. So we make our margin in the middle there.
mm.
So we want to make that clear so people don't think like this is some kind of highway robbery.
Yeah.
But with Greenleaf, we are so flexible, and we work with people at all different stages. So sometimes people come to me with just a glimmer in their eye and a big idea, and so we work with them all the way through developing the manuscript to designing it, producing it. We have a full-time print buyer, brokers printing, and then we can work up a solid marketing campaign and distribute it out to the world. And then other people come to me with a book that's already produced and they've got pallets in their garage and they're help me sell it. And if
Yeah.
it's a book that works with our sales channels, then we can take it on just as distribution. And then we have a million projects, not quite, but a lot of projects that fall somewhere in between those. So every project is different. The most typical scenario is someone comes to me with a manuscript that's about done. And then we do what's called an editorial diagnosis, which sounds really scary. I think, Cary, we did one for you, right?
Yeah, you
And
did. It
and
was
people get
scary.
really, yeah, people get really nervous, but it's really to make sure that we are of one mind in terms of how we would work together going forward and what this book could become.
Hmm.
And from there, we're able to put together a picture financially and timeline wise. Here's what it would look like to work with us. And then we can turn some dials we can't turn. We can't edit half a book. Um, and we go from there. So It's a shorter process than you would experience with the traditional route, because just finding an agent takes a long time, and then working up the proposal and finally
Hmm.
hopefully getting a deal, and then the publishing process itself, years. It'll take years. Ours are usually, if we're pitching to brick and mortar, that timeline is 9 months to a year, simply because we have to pitch them 6 months before the book comes out. So we're kind of driven by their merchandising timelines. And then if someone
Hmm.
does a digital approach where we're only putting it up in a print on demand model, which we do have an imprint for, significantly faster. It can be 6 to 9 months.
Mm. So if someone wanted to basically work with you at one of those various stages, they would just reach out, through greenleafbookgroup.com and say, "Hey, Tanya, team, this is where I'm at." Kind of, and then you have a different avenue for each of them based on where they're at.
Yep,
Correct.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a whole team that would look at their individual circumstances and goals and what they have, and then kind of figure out what path makes sense for them.
Awesome. And I'm curious, what is your take on the free plus shipping model and the book funnel, where you're like, "Hey, buy my book for 9.99, you just cover the shipping," and then it upsells them to a funnel where there's another offer and then a higher offer. What's your take on those? Because I see a lot of entrepreneurs out there doing that model. And I know a bunch of them, but I wonder what your take is.
I guess it depends on the book and the audience. If you think
Yeah.
ultimately that they're going to read the book and then convert into a customer for the next thing, it could be effective. But the biggest challenge is that first step, right? Because I often tell people, and it's in my book, when you're thinking about getting someone to not just buy your book but read it, you're not asking them for $20. You're asking them for 2 weeks at least, right? Like, reading a book takes time, and that's a
Yeah.
commitment, and none of us have any time. And we're
Yeah.
tempted by things that are faster. You're going to go watch Netflix.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a real honor and a commitment when someone reads your book, and
Yeah.
so you have to have that in mind, because it's not as easy as it sounds to actually get people to read it. But I think then if they read it, part of that, what you're describing there, that is an effort to build up a sales history online. Like, though, there's a whole system there that's
Mhm.
helping that author establish a retail sales history, which will benefit them for later book projects, and later publishing deals. We could get down in the weeds on that. But yeah, I think it just kind of depends on who you're trying to target, and then how good your book is.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something. It's more like the online marketing game rather than the book game. I feel like once you start
Yeah.
to get building out the funnel and the upsell, and I've seen success with self-published books. Like I know, Hal Elrod, he sold what 2 million copies of his self-published book. So it is possible if you write a great book. You have to write a great book in any case. If you really want it to have a positive impact. What would you say is, I mean, and we kind of touched on it, but what would you say is the absolute like biggest mistake that you see authors across the board make? Because I know you've been in the game so well, there's some that are just super common. What are those?
Oh boy. um, I think if we're looking big picture, the biggest mistake and the most common mistake is underestimating what it takes to promote the book. I think you
Mm,
can fall into this magical thinking, right? Where you did something that was so hard, and we're all taught growing up, you do these difficult, hard
yeah,
things, good things
you
happen
get a
to you.
trophy. Everyone gets a trophy. Come on.
So, my God, you spend
Yeah,
years writing this book, and you're just like, whew, now I can just put it out to the universe and it'll do its
yeah,
thing. And that is sadly not the case.
yeah.
This is such a competitive business.
Mm,
And there's different stats about this, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3,000 books published every day. So that's, of course, competing with everything else out there, media
yep.
wise. It's crazy. So you really have to think strategically and early about how you're going to promote the book, build your platform, get
Mm,
them engaged and committed to buying the book when it comes out, and then hold on to them so that you have them, in your little ecosystem for future products or books or whatever it may be. And so it really takes some very strategic, like I said, and careful thought, because I think too many people sit back and just think like, yeah, I hope to get some podcast interviews and blog features and we'll be good. And
Yeah.
it's got to be more than that.
Mm. So, and I want to get into the rapid fire round and ask you the traditional happy hustle questions too, but I'm very interested in this process as I am going through it. In terms of a book launch, what are the key components to having a successful book launch? Obviously strategy, but give us a like maybe the overarching framework.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to have a lot of events, if you will. And I know it's harder in these COVID times, but in other ways, it's easier because you can be more sort of dispersed
Mm,
geographically if you're just doing everything virtually. Um, People connect with the author, and it's been proven again and again in terms of the factors that lead someone to buy a book. It's rarely the cover or the title. It's a word of mouth recommendation from friend or family, or
yep.
they know who the author is, or they've seen you somewhere, or they otherwise connect with you. So, really focusing on that connection is important. A lot of authors try to kind of hire out the marketing of the book, and you can hire out parts of it for sure, but you have to be in the foreground and
Yeah.
they have to be able to have this very human experience with the author. I
Mm,
think that's important. And there are a million ways to do that, whether it's using video for promotion or doing, these types of video podcast interviews. Video, of course, is hugely effective. And other people aren't always comfortable with all of these different things, right? So I think it's important for you to find out also what you're committed to doing on a regular basis. If you hate video and you can't stand hearing your own voice, then you better be doing a lot of social media posts and blogging and finding other ways to stay in front of an audience or build an
mm,
audience.
yep.
So there's the whole middle section of my book, the influence section, deals with all of your choices here.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get that book. Let's just give the link one more time. It's ideasinfluenceandincome.com. You guys, I'm telling you, worth the read. You hear Tanya, wealth of knowledge. And also, Tanya, I want to ask you, I ask all my guests this, what was your first hustle? The first thing you did for money?
The very first thing I did, is this a family friendly show?
Sometimes. My last episode that dropped was a lot of F bombs.
Okay. The very first thing I did, I was in elementary school and I walked door to door putting real estate flyers on people's doors for like 5 cents a house.
Nice.
And then I
Nice.
stopped I grew up in California, so I'd stop at Carl's Jr. on the way home and get a Western bacon cheeseburger with my earnings.
There you go. Love it.
And the reason I
Yeah.
asked if it was family friendly, I'll phrase this in a way that's friendly. When I was in college, I lived above a chocolate shop, and they had a sign in the window that said hiring overnight, and I was like, oh my God, that's a dream job, right? So I figured that's perfect. I can just walk downstairs and go to work at overnight. And so I went in and the guy was like, great, when can you start? So the first day I come in, he starts training me and he's like, what you'll be doing is fulfilling the custom orders we get. And I'm like, cool. So he pulls out what I will call anatomical molds.
Oh,
And my job was to make the chocolate anatomical candies
oh, wow.
that people would special order. And I did that for some time.
Oh, I can only imagine those shapes. And my mind is wandering, Tanya. That's good. All right. So, Tanya, I'd like to ask a couple different questions in multiple disciplines. One being health. First and foremost, I know you're very active. You're outdoors, um, a lot with your dogs and your husband, and I see your, pictures online. Talk to us about a happy hustle hack, something that helps you optimize your health and stay young, vibrant, and healthy.
Sure. Well, this one won't be for everyone because it's expensive, I think, by some people's standards. But I recently did the Viome test,
Oh, nice.
VIOME.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's for those of you who haven't heard of it. It's basically an analysis of your digestive health. And
Mm,
I'm a believer that there is a connection, as many believe, between what's happening in your gut and what's happening certainly in your mind and other areas of your body. And So I had been having just, I think I thought stress related issues with my gut. And so I did the whole volume thing, and they give you back this really, really interesting panel of results that evaluate your digestive health and the healthy bacteria in your gut, and all of these different analysis of how effective your gut is working.
Hmm.
And then the hack, I suppose, would be, this is where they get you. If you like, you can get this. Basically, it's a customized supplement that's built
Hmm.
just to handle some of those inefficiencies or deficiencies that they discovered in the panel that they did. And so I chose to
Ah,
do that. And I have probably 8 or 9 of these capsules that I take every day, and my probiotics. And when I look at the list of supplements in there, it's probably 50 different things, but they're all
hmm.
for various deficiencies that I had. It's about $120 a month to do the custom supplements. And I think the test was like 90 or 100.
Hmm.
But I noticed a difference within 30 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, a good difference. Like my energy is
Yeah.
different. I'm sleeping better. I don't have some of like cramping issues I used to have. So for
Hmm.
me, like that $120 a month is worth
Yeah.
it to know that I've sort of dialed in on that area of my health.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that. I mean, I believe in testing, not guessing. Being deep in the biohacking game for years, I really do think everyone should be getting regular panels. Getting really clear on what vitamin and mineral deficiencies, what are the environmental genetic mismatches, what are those toxins specifically for you. Because everyone's different. So I
Mhm.
love that you said that, Tanya. That's very awesome. Let's talk about money. I like to talk about a happy hustle hack for money. I'm sure you made a bunch. I'm sure you lost a bunch. What is a happy hustle hack for money that you could share with the happy hustlers out there?
Well, we'll tie it back to the book because I think people are always talking about passive income. And one of the cool things once you have a book is you can, if you have the rights to do so, you can repurpose that book into so many other things, right? So,
Mm,
online learning, for instance, or these types of programs that sit in the background and help you have a passive income source while you work on other things that require your energy.
mm,
So, I think that's one of the main reasons a lot of people come to us wanting the book. So, the book is out there kind of doing the work for them, or just bringing in leads for their business that are pre-qualified because someone has already read the book and knows how you approach solving a problem. It kind of skips all of that early and time consuming process of qualifying a lead for you. So that's a big one that ties back to the whole book discussion.
yeah, I love that. Passive income, creating reoccurring revenue, and then leveraging your IP in various ways. Great point there. Let's talk about spirituality. And not necessarily one God or another, but do you have a happy hustle hack for your spirituality? Something that helps you tap into a higher power?
I am so blessed that I have a group of people around me, sort of my own executive mastermind group,
Oh, cool.
who introduced me to meditation. And I'm sure that's probably a lot of people's answer. And I blew it off for years. I was like, I just, that's not for me.
Yeah.
and, and then I realized with their guidance that there are different ways to do it. You don't have to sit there saying Om. And for me, being being out in nature is naturally meditative, right? Like I
Yep.
can't help, it's so beautiful. I can't help but only think about what's around me. And I didn't realize that that was a form of meditation. And once I did, and I was tapped into, okay, how is it that I feel different in this moment and more at peace, then to be able to try and replicate that when I'm not in nature, or whenever I know I just need to tap into that sort of wellspring of peace that I have inside of me, it's easier to get there when you've practiced it, right? So that's been a big one for me.
Yeah, love that. Meditation, so crucial. Even just getting still in nature and just focus on your breath. You don't have to say Om. Like Tommy, if you want to, say Om. But if you don't, just be still. Focus on your breath. Love it. Last one before we dive into the rapid fire round. What is a happy hustle hack for entrepreneurship? Because I know not only are you an awesome, writer and author and podcaster, but you run a business. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. What is a happy hustle hack that you've learned regarding entrepreneurship that you can share with the happy hustlers?
I think the entrepreneurship community, is tripping over my tongue, is so eager and willing to help. Um, to not ask for help would be a shame. I think they all want to see other people succeed. just like you doing this podcast. Everybody's here to bring each other up. So I think sometimes people get really worried about guarding their idea, and I don't want to tell anybody about it.
Mm,
They might steal it.
yeah.
And there's so much work that goes into this. I think the chances of someone stealing that idea are really minimal. So I would say ask for help early and often. That's really important.
Mm, great points there. Definitely ask for help. Let's dive into the rapid fire round. This is basically where I just ask you random questions and you answer honestly. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Oh God, okay.
All right. Favorite movie? Go.
Fandango.
Fandango. Favorite food? Awesome.
Sushi.
Favorite book?
Oh gosh, this gets me into trouble. I'm going to go with On the Road.
Awesome. What's your spirit animal?
Hawk.
Best business advice?
Ask for help.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
X-ray vision.
Oh, if you had one billboard that was going to be shared with the entire world with your last final message, what would that billboard say?
Live with love.
Love it. One word you wish to be synonymous with your name for the rest of your life.
Mm. Empowerment.
Mm. And three things you're most grateful for.
My family, and I will include my pets in my family.
Your fur children.
Yep. My purpose. Very blessed to do the work I do because it's got purpose baked in, and my health.
Awesome, Tanya. You crushed that rapid fire round. Where can people go to find out more about you, to learn about, what you're up to with Greenleaf and obviously get your book? Give us some links and where the Happy Hustlers can check you out.
Sure. So ideasinfluenceandincome.com is the URL for the book. And from there, you can get to a lot of other places. Greenleafbookgroup.com is the company where we do the publishing and distributing of books. If you have something that you want to submit to us and you already know you want to do that, that's probably the best place to go. And what else? On Twitter, I'm at Tanya Hall.
Amazing, Tanya. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. Thank you for sharing your love, your light, your wisdom with the Happy Hustlers. This has been amazing. Any final thoughts before I ask you the final question?
Final thoughts. I would like to give people a word of encouragement. I think I'm always so happy to see someone's face when they unbox their books for the first time. Like it can make me cry.
Oh,
It's so powerful to know that you had a part in helping someone achieve this goal. So to the extent that I can help anybody out there, they have a question, please feel free to reach out. I'm at Tanya at greenleafbookgroup.com. I don't care if you email me directly. It's my joy and really a blessing to be able to help people do this.
wow, Tanya, that's beautiful. And guys, take action on that. If you have a book idea, Tanya's offering her valuable knowledge to you. So take action. Thank you, Tanya, for that. And final question. What does happy hustling mean to you?
Happy hustling is kind of how I live my life because I found work that is meaningful to me and where I'm doing something good for the world. And that puts a smile on my face and makes money at the same time. So there you have it.
Oh, I love it. That was awesome. Tanya, you crushed it. Thanks all for watching and listening. Peace and love. We're out.